I'd like to call the meeting to order for the 2027 budget workshop. City Council present and the city administrator, city clerk, and Matt from Baker Tilly. Today's Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. So we're going to try tonight to kind of work through and see where we are with the budget and what's viable and what is not. I want to kind of lead off with Scott kind of giving his opinion, and then Russ, you all join in, chime in whenever. So, Russ, Scott's deferring to you.
I'd let these guys kind of show us what they plan to show us,
Yeah, so we can kind of
and then we'll
start it off. Matt,
from there.
Do what?
Matt's going to
Then we'll
step us
take it from
through,
Okay.
and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay, this is an overview of the general fund that uses essentially a flat mill levy from what was adopted last year. It is going to provide, if you can see there.
Matt, I'm sorry, can I ask you something? Can you please pull the microphone close to you? I had a couple I couldn't hear you last time. Thank you, sir.
It's an ending fund balance for the budget year of 2027 of $338,000, which is about 22-ish thousand less than we'll end 2026, based on our current estimate. We are being fairly conservative with our revenue projections, not overly so for budgeting purposes, I don't believe. We are figuring in what the impact of the NRP is going to do to the budget, which was omitted last year, and so that's another thing we have to take into account. As far as the expenditures, what we're presenting here, this really hasn't changed from what you've seen from your departments already. There's been some adjustments, things like transfers where necessary, and we've gone in and basically cut as deep as we can out of the expenditure side to get you to where you've got a reasonable fund balance heading into the beginning of next year, but without some kind of change to the mill levy beyond adopting what we're presenting here, which again is which is basically flat to what was adopted last year. We are going to see a reduction in ending fund balance. This is the budget for the library. You are the conduit by which the library is able to levy property tax for their funding. Again, the NRP issue last year resulted in them having a lower payout than what was we believe we were budgeting. So this will address that and get them funded at the level that they've requested for the year. Cemetery fund, again, also keeping the levy flat here for them. You can see the expenditure is, the budget number for the expenditure is lower lower than what was adopted last year. I believe that there was a salary that was being budgeted there that was no longer completely out of there, so we've got a lower personnel cost here, and that's the main reason for that reduction. You can still see that we're operating in the negative there, slight reduction of fund balance, so you're fine for now, but going forward we need to probably look at addressing that. This is the NRP fund. This is the fund we plug in these NRP numbers. They're simply there to give you fund balance, or excuse me, to give you budget authority, but we budget the full amount, even though you look at the 2025 actual and we were not close to it. It doesn't impact your mill levy, is what I'm saying. Bond and interest fund, this is the last one that you actually do have a portion of ad valorem tax here. Again, it's flat, or relatively flat. This essentially is where you pay your debt service from, and so the numbers have been updated to reflect your outstanding debt, the debt service due in 2027, and that's where we deal with that here. Electric fund next, still maintaining pretty decent fund balance. I guess we're going to have a discussion at the next meeting about adjusting the number for the franchise fee. So that may have an impact on this. We'll, if so, we'll address it prior to submission of the final approved budget. Again, I just want to reiterate the publication that's going out this week is nothing more than a cap, another self-imposed cap on what you are allowed to levy. So don't feel like you've locked yourself in anything already because you haven't. So we can still bring these numbers down before final budget submission.
And the reason for that, we had to submit that to the newspaper before 1 o'clock today to be able to meet the publication timeframes that the state has in place, and for us to have our budget hearing on September 1st.
My recommendation for
To
next,
clarify real quick, so what that means is then if you published a flat mill levy neutral, then by definition, we couldn't raise it. No, that's not right, or no, we couldn't.
whatever you publish is the maximum mill levy you are allowed to adopt.
Okay, that's what I want to understand.
And the reason, so the way it works is you did the notice to the county back in July, which was like the first time you've stuck your foot in the ground and says, this is the most we can adopt. Purpose of that is to get a number to them so they can send out those notices to the public, which you probably already received one within the last few weeks from the county saying, hey, this is what your mill levy is going to look like. This is what your payment is actually going to look like versus what all these various taxing entities did last year. And the purpose of this is to, get notice published so people have time to review before you adopt, so they can come in and, make themselves heard at the public comment of the public hearing. There's 2 public hearings because you have elected to exceed R&R. There's the R&R public hearing, which you have to go through first. You have to approve that, close it, and then have the regular public hearing, and then adopt budget as normal. And there's, as we saw last year, there's various steps we have to take to do that correctly. So we'll make sure we're ready for that on the night of that you do decide to adopt. You have until October 1st, I believe, is the final date you can adopt. So anyway, sorry for that digression. Water fund, you see here, this anticipates action being taken to, continue to follow the plan that we set out with to increase rates regularly, so we're not seeing a reduction and actually building back into that fund balance. You see here, if we make those adjustments as we've planned for, which we're going to be discussing in the coming weeks, we will be ending 2027 above the 15% threshold for your fund balance reserve. That's a very positive sign, but again, I just want to reiterate, we really should be getting everybody to 15% and then work toward moving towards 25%. Even because in my opinion, for a utility, 25% is still a very low target for a healthy fund. So, but again, we are moving in the right direction, which is a good sign. Wastewater, on the other hand, you see is still quite a bit below that, even with the anticipated 8+% that we need rate increase we need to do for this year. Still only ending 2027 at 130,000, which is about 100,000 and 110,000 less than your fund balance target of 15%. Again, we've seen continued growth in particularly personnel costs here, as well as for contractuals. But everything else seems to be fairly stable. The only thing I would have you notice is that we did have to anticipate some, if possible, to eliminate some commodity and capital spending this year as we finish out the year, just to make sure that we're not hitting our 107 or $1.5 million budget authority without going over it. Again, most of that difference is because of higher personnel and contractual costs. So any projects, any necessary in the short term spending for wastewater, I think we need to cap, and we'll probably still be coming to you late in the year to do a budget amendment, at least for this fund. Refuse and recycling, again, not quite as volatile as some of your other utilities, but again, you see there we did begin the year with a slight negative fund balance. So we've built in some reserves here to make sure that we don't do that again.
Real quick to go back to that, I don't want to lose that. So, was the gas utility the only one that we had that wasn't maxed out on the franchise fee?
Yes.
So we've done so already with the refuse and recycling.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm including this here because you have budgeted the Special Parks and Recreation Fund in the past. You don't really, I mean, you do, and since you do receive your alcohol liquor fund, a portion of it here, it's important that we make sure that this, you do approve a capital budget for it. But again, we don't anticipate any expenses this year, but you will have up to the full amount of your fund balance available in 2027. Quality of life sales tax fund, again, same thing. We're budgeting the full amount of your carryover plus whatever revenue minus expenses you have as your budget for 27. Special highway, again, here, we're not, we're giving you the full amount of what you can spend, save the revenue for the brick streets, which, we're going to try to hold that and let it build up again through 2027 so you can do bigger projects after 2027. Swimming pool sales tax fund, there hasn't been any movement here, so I'm just budgeting the full amount of your fund balance again so you have it available. At some point, we talked about using this for other park projects, so that's still an option. Sales tax CIP fund, again, same thing, just budgeting the full amount of that transfer so you take advantage of any potential fund balance you may have. This is the notice that was published. The total mill levy is quite a bit more than what's showing in that center section. Again, remember the actual amount that you levied was closer to 43.39, the actual amount from 25. The 2026 amount got ratcheted down because of that NRP reduction not being taken into account prior to adoption. So we had to build that back in as part of our submission for publication this year. The budget you've seen tonight is not a 44.928 projected mill levy. What we did for tonight was this number here, 42.247 mills in the general or total. What that generates is in line with the numbers you've seen so far. And so I prepared these charts to show you a couple of different scenarios of what the general fund ending fund balance will look like over the next few years. For the general ad valorem tax growth after 2027, we're capping that at 3% a year because we anticipate that's probably what the state legislature is going to begin capping sales tax or property tax growth at after the new governor is in office. The only thing that saved it from happening this year is Laura Kelly vetoed it, so they will probably be capping your ad valorem tax growth at 3% of what was collected the prior years. So that's what we use for that projection. For the other revenue, we again matched it with about a 3% growth, just because many of your other inflationary funded or things that are impacted by inflation that seem to be following that kind of trend of about 3% growth a year. I don't think it's overly conservative. I don't think it's overly I think it's a pretty safe number to use for this kind of a 5-year projection. On the expenditure side, in the near term for 2028, I'm using the current MCI index rate of growth, which on average for the year is about 4.5%. For 2029, I'm bringing that down to 4%, and for 2030, I'm bringing that down to 3.5%. Those are extremely conservative projections for what your expenditures will be. That does not take into account any sort of regular COLA merit increase for your employees. It doesn't take into account the types of, regular high increases in other employee benefit costs like health insurance that you've seen. It doesn't take into account the need for additional capital projects that don't have the dedicated funding source, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's unrealistic to expect your expenditures to grow by that slow of an amount, but for the purposes of this exercise, I thought it would be appropriate to use that as our marker, just to look at what our reserve fund balance goals look like. The top left corner is the first scenario I want to talk about. This assumes the mill levy as presented and no additional inflow of cash from sale of tax credits or the sale of city property. And you can see there that ending fund balance, which is that sort of line in the center that's highlighted in yellow, it continues to be well below the reserve targets of both 15 and 25%. The reserve target 15% is what that target would be at 15% and at 25%. The deficit number, that shows how far below those targets you are in each of these years. And you can see it grows from 287,000 for 2026 as below that target up to in 2030, 864,000, and up to a cool 1.38 million for a deficit to the 25%. Now, let's pretend that let's hope that we get some one-off cash coming in, and maintaining that same mill levy, selling the full amount of your tax credits of $385,000. We anticipated those sales. Those sales would have to probably mostly come this year. I think, are you allowed to sell them, any that are left over in the following year?
Yes. So how it works with the tax credits are good for us to sell over the period of 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they would just completely go away. But the hope would be to sell them all this fall. But if we don't sell them all, then we've got the next year and then the year after that until we hit the 10-year mark.
So anyway, it'll essentially, this is a very ambitious sell them all this year, but it'll pretty much have the same impact on long-term fund balance regardless. So this assumes all of those tax credits are sold, and then in 27, some city property is sold to the amount of 115,000, which, again, that's probably an ambitious number, but for the purpose of this exercise, I wanted you to see it. What this would do is it would get you above your 15% target by the end of this year if you sold the full 385,000 in tax credits. It would grow again next year when you sold $115,000 worth of city property, and you would even be above it again in 2028. But without any other changes to the mill levy, you will be below that reserve again by 2029, and you'll double it almost going into 2030. And again, remember, I'm reducing the multiplier for expenditures for 2030 from the numbers I used for 28 and 29, and you're still going in the wrong direction, even with the sale of that property. The bottom two, the first one shows what the reserve targets would look like if you adopted the full amount of the what we published as your cap to be for property tax. This does include the reduction for the NRP, et cetera. And still, you'll notice that at the 15% reserve target, you're still not meeting it this year, next year. But you are reducing that deficit in 28 and 29. So you are moving in the right direction, at least in the short term. But again, it's going to take more than just a one-off, mill correction to close that, because it's still a structural deficit, even with the fairly modest amount of mills that you could possibly increase this year. The final one in the bottom right is the same mill levy with your sale of tax credits and personal property. And again, you see that you are hitting your target, your 50% target at least going forward. You see it start to taper off there after the first couple of years. But again, we're, being ambitious with that here. So we just wanted to show you what that situation would look like. Final thing here is I just want to show you what it would look like if you did adopt the full amount that was put in the notice versus what we've proposed. The impact on a $200,000 home would be $61.66 a year. $300,000 home, $92.49, and a $400,000 home would be $123.33. And again, that does not take into account the full amount of that person's property tax bill, only the city's portion, and what the difference would be between last year and this year.
Is that rough, basically the 4.8% assessed valuation increase? I mean, that's.
No, this is assuming you increase the mills by 2.6. And so it does not include anything that would have, it does, if the value of their home appreciated, this does not take that into account. This only takes into account what an increase in mill levy would do. Yeah. So again, we don't need decisions on anything tonight, but we wanted to prepare these scenarios. That's what I promised the last time, that we'd look at that. And I just, it would be great if we sold those tax credits. It would be great if you were able to sell some property, but I still think that long term it does not solve the structural issue in place without some kind of additional cuts or and we looked at cuts last time, and we were doing things that I don't think are, I mean, they would definitely reduce your expenditure, but I don't know how much they would benefit your city operations or quality of life for your residents. But there are the scenario where you are able to have some of that one-time cash flow. Perhaps it will give you the bridge to where things are operating better, things are growing again, and you're able to do more with the resources you have. But as I showed you, I mean, best case scenario, you're still, you've got another year basically after next year for that to affect your bottom line before something else is going to have to change that outside of your control to, fix the issue.
So just help me get it right in my head. So we keep talking about this one-time addition to the reserve. And I mean, the way I look at that is, let's say that our reserve is already the same. These things were already in the reserve. So to me, if it's going in the reserve, you're not paying for something that's ongoing, like a salary increase. So let me go back to my premise. So our one-time adds to the reserve gets it to a certain point. If we hit our forecast correctly, that reserve stays the same for the next year and the next year and the next year. So the only way that reserve starts going negative is if our expenditures start outstripping our revenue, and that's what we try to stay ahead of, right? That's where then we go in and look at, we don't want to reduce the reserve anymore, so we're going to have to go make some changes, correct? So that, to me, that one-time adds are extremely important, and then it gives you just like you've reset yourself. Now it's like, okay, we're projecting large increases next year. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for them, and there's no more one-time things to shore up the reserve. So I just we keep talking about them like they're not solving the problem. Well, they are. but it doesn't solve future problems that we may have or may not have.
Right.
Right? And if our forecast is accurate for 27, our reserve is going to stay the same. I mean, if we add those one-time adds and it gets us to, 700 and some thousand, 16%, we'll stay there. We'll be there at the end of 27 as well. We might be better if our sales tax forecast was conservatively low, those sorts of things. If our expenditures were forecast to be higher than they actually were. So I think I guess I don't want to discount it like it feels like we're trying to do. It's important that we do that because then you have the ability then to pay for things if you have an emergency and or if you missed your forecast the wrong way, you don't go negative. But I agree with you. We're probably at the low end of where we need to be. So the question is then going forward, how do we get those up, to the higher end of the policy? And then that's where you get into, you get into mill levy, right? And so explain to me again real quick on the 3% that we've seen the proposal that didn't make it. How does that relate to assessed valuation and mill levy from a city perspective? Does it cap you at the combination of both of those being 3%?
You levy $100,000 this year, you would be able to levy $103,000 next year.
Okay, so it does take in consideration both mill levy and assessed value.
No, it forces you, if you have growth in valuation, it forces you to lower your mill levy
Right.
to where you capture no more than 3% growth in total dollars.
Okay. So
Again, it hadn't been passed.
So if 65% of our budget is, personnel and that's, growing at 5-7% a year, which is about what we're doing, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it means,
But that we actually can't fix other than cutting expenses.
I mean, you essentially have to potentially put a freeze on wage increases. You have to take into account any large change to your health insurance premium. Employees are probably going to have to take on a larger portion of that. You're probably going to see, I don't want to speculate on capers and KPNF, but are you guys KPNF? Yeah, that's what I thought. So that KPNF has gone up recently, whereas capers is flat or reducing slightly for the employer contribution. But again, KPNF is a great benefit for law enforcement and fire. So I would never. Once you're in it, you're in it. You can't opt out anyway. But again, any increases there that would be above that 3% are going to have to come out of the. Going to have to come off the top. So yeah, any sort of. I mean, at best case scenario, you'll be able to offer a 3% merit and COLA every year, but it's going to be harder to fill open positions. It's going to be harder to
Well,
it's going to be harder to maintain your whatever.
everybody's going to be in the same boat, though.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify,
Cities that have a higher growth are going to be better off.
Right.
But because they will,
from a growth perspective.
yeah, because 3%. If you're 3% is 3%, but if you're, already in a better position, cities that are growing, they're taking advantage of other revenue inputs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think with RID, our situation is even with our growth, we're not going to see it immediately.
That's the deal.
We got a gap potentially. And just to close out the 3% scenario, if I remember correctly, if we did present a budget that did go above that 3%, they could petition to have an election to vote on that or not.
yeah.
So
Yeah, you're not barred from doing it.
not barred, but it's a big old hoop.
Yeah, you gotta jump through it, yeah.
But I think it's clearly then you present exactly what we did last time, and here's what you're gonna have to cut to get to this any new, law that capped us at 3%.
Do we know what that election would look like? Sorry about my voice, I have a cold. Do we know what that election would look like? Because obviously, I mean, it wouldn't be the cost. I mean, the whole reason we don't do elections for any, like a ton of decisions, is because we don't necessarily have to on all of them. And then the other one is there's an expense to the city, quite considerable one. So the elections for that, it's only 5% of the population. So that wouldn't be like super expensive.
Well, the easy threshold is the petition requirement is a very small percentage of, I want to say, actual voters in the prior election. So it's not, unless you had a massive turnout.
What voting system and all that, like, do we have to have like a voting station?
No,
And-
county elections will still do. It'll just get added to the,
More likely to be like the primary, like we just had
Yeah.
beginning of August.
Okay.
Those are some of the questions that I have with it. Is that
Well,
we get our assessed evaluation say June 15th,
Right.
Okay, so but how do you we got to make decisions here really quick,
Real
because
fast.
There's you have to have 45 to 60 to 90 days
Yeah.
ahead of time to hit the ballot. So there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been thought out thoroughly, that I have a bunch of questions of how logistically that would actually transpire.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me a big one is cost. What would the cost be? Would the county just do it for free, or
No,
would they
they're
charge?
not
They're going
gonna-
to charge. That's what I. Thank you, Julie. That's the response I was hoping for. So there would be a cost to the city even asking for more money.
Yeah, so usually there's a cost. I remember this has been several years back when we were looking into, I think, for the brick streets, and I want to say that the cost to put on the election was like $30-something thousand, between $30,000 and $40,000 is what the cost was that we would have to
Just to add it to the ballot.
just to add it to the ballot if we wanted to have our own separate election. That's what the cost was going to be. So you would want to, do it at the same time that there's like a primary or something or regular going
Right.
on. So, but that it kind of depends on, because we have to have our proposed voted on approved budget to the county, before October 1.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that would have to move to be able to make all this work. And those are a lot of questions I've got, and it'll be interesting to see what the legislature decides as we move into the 27 year. But I do foresee that they are gonna cap it. So what that number is, I don't know. What they had decided on and sent to Governor Kelly's desk was 3%. So, but I still think that was still a lot of questions. They were just trying to get something through. So.
So for some context, that's going to matter depending on where you live, right? Like there are going to be some communities where they don't grow 3%, so who cares?
Correct.
There's going to be some communities that are growing 7%, and they're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep up? So
Exactly.
in the last 10 years, how many times have we gone over 3%? I mean, I don't know that answer.
Or revenue year over year from a
From what the state's legislator's proposing, that 3%, so his example, to Matt's example, if you levied $100,000, then you can only levy $103,000 total.
So if you don't change the mill levy and the assessed valuation goes up 3%, you're maxed.
Right.
How many times have our assessed valuation been over 3%? A lot.
It's been,
Almost
I don't,
all the time.
in the last 10 years, I would.
It's a combination of both, right?
No.
You got to reduce your mill levy. It's like revenue neutral. It's not revenue neutral. It's revenue 3%.
If it's a bad idea, it won't last long.
But there'll be a lot of
You have to wait 2 years.
struggling.
I mean, I think most of the legwork's already done on it. If they propose 3% and the elections don't change, then you're going to get the same 3% proposal. Well, maybe you actually might get more aggressive depending on different ways.
For me, it's the assessed valuation piece that you can't.
Yeah.
You don't
But
control.
wasn't this what Senate Bill 13 was attempting to do? Wasn't this the exact same thing? So they, I guess, want to go further?
Yeah. They didn't like the answer, so they're going to do it again.
Well, no. What happened was that communities weren't scared by it, and they said, well, we'll just exceed mill revenue neutral. I mean, that's what happened. They said, okay, well, let's do this. Call it what it is. That's what it is.
What's your take on all this, Russ?
You know, I think, you know, you got to look at the whole picture, and I kind of like how the forecast shows, 5 years out. And it really kind of puts in perspective of where we're at today and where potentially we would be, 5 years from now. Could we this year, with selling the tax credits, make it to fund policy for the 27 year? Yes. That is definitely doable. But from that point on, we're going to have to really, make some tough decisions about either raising the mill or reducing services. And that's where it comes down to. I don't really want to see us reduce any services that we're already providing for our citizens. But I think this is, it comes down to the millage, and when you look at the millage and on this, and kind of how he talked about the $200,000, the $300,000 and $400,000 house. Let's just say you're at the $300,000 for the difference in mill levy at a 2.6, and I'm not saying raise the mill levy 2.6, but that's $92. That's what you're looking at. So you're looking at less than, let's just say $8 a month, to be able to keep up with, with where we need to be. One of the things is that, he talked about is not, doing, pay increases. I think, those are something we have a lot of tenured employees. I think we'd start seeing some turnover, which would hurt our overall services to our citizens. So is it doable this year not to? Yes. But going forward, I think we're going to have to increase.
But I think for me, in my simple world, is that it seems that we're going through and raiding all the possible clauses we can raid to come up with the money to carry us through for basically in the 27, but it doesn't really prepare us for 28 and get us lined up there. And I mean, I'm like, Jay, I want to sell some buildings to kind of help some money out here. But, we only have so many to sell, and we only have so many tax credits. So we're kind of temporarily, to use this euphemism, kicking the can down the road to where we're going to have to face even a harder decision later on. That's in my simple world. Is that how, is that?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yes, for sure. I will say this, it's never easy to raise taxes on anybody. I don't want to pay any more taxes. But I don't necessarily want to give up any services either, is where I come back to.
When the people, at the state, county, when they determine what the assessed valuation is for whatever district or whatever taxing district it is, I'm sure they do come up with that number, not like with some bingo lottery balls, like they're actually using metrics and.
Oh yeah, it's
probably, so that might be a good representative, a pretty good, close representative of what communities do need to grow by in order to sustain.
Correct. Yeah.
On a hard cap at 3 doesn't.
Yeah.
So to Scott's point from the last time we met, the problem we have here is that we had an assessed valuation of 7% last year, and this year we had 4.
4.8.
There's your math problem right there. That's where we're short.
And we've had them in years past where they hit 10 before,
right,
or more, and so
that number is determined based on actual numbers, actual data from your community.
Actual data, actual sales, like comp sales from your community of like sized houses.
Right.
There's such a metrics that goes into it. Brad Eldridge from the county came down and he put on the appraisers class at the library that he offered for citizens to come out to understand how valuations and all those different things work.
Right.
There's probably about 20 people that showed up. I was there myself, just to listen and see what he had to say. And he went into a really in-depth of how it works, as well as on the Douglas County website. They also he's got some PowerPoints on there that you can click through.
Right.
And will kind of help bring a person up to speed on understanding how they get from point A to point B.
Oh, and you know, I mean, there's people listening right now who said, no, they messed mine up one time and I appealed it and I won. And say, because I'm not saying that it's a perfect system, that there's an appeals process and that they do miss it, but it's a hell of a lot closer than setting a ceiling at 3%, as far as trying to reflect what your community needs and
Yes.
how to budget for it.
For sure.
Well, get out and vote.
Well, you know, I know, and this probably it's a little bit of a side thing when you talk about reducing services. I attended National Disaster School at the Fire Command Center in Pennsylvania for an entire week, where we had umpteen thousand scenarios in the first day of the class, and I found this very interesting. Combination of fire chiefs and directors and cops and all this, and it came down to, what do people expect after a national disaster? What's the first thing they want? It wasn't police protection. It was, I want my streets cleaned. I want the electricity on. I want my trash picked up. I want to be able, those quality of life, necessary things that we provide now. That's what they wanted. I want my normal life back. And I mean, when we start cutting services, that's when we start impacting those normal lives. And I think it's interesting that, you know, people want that. They expect that. So I'm just not a fan of cutting services or anything. I don't want to do that, for me personally.
We're running them thin.
No, we are.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, or running them even
no,
thinner.
I agree. I agree. I agree 100%. But we got some tough choices.
Kind of just based on all of this, you know, we went through in depth last time, you know, a 5% decrease, about 210,000. You know, feels to me like we need to do something. You know, and I think my understanding is we are you planning on using any of those cuts in what you published? It doesn't look like on the expenditure number you did. I guess I'm just asking, is there any of it? I don't want to say we're going to be in a cutting mode going forward, but we very well may be. And are things we can do now that are the least impactful to get started on?
I mean, so as far as with this budget, is those cuts are still necessarily in there, even though is how I had it set up. Now I'd have to visit with Matt just to make sure that's correct, but that was my understanding.
So
those similar cuts are still in there.
No, the 5% exercise we went through did not produce anything that I put.
Yeah, so they're not in.
No.
None of the 5%.
That's what I'm asking. No.
I'm talking my original budget.
No, that's what I was trying to get at.
My
So-
original budget, yes.
yeah,
all
so-
those are still in there.
So to clarify, we went through and talked about 210,000 to get to 5%, which obviously was very difficult, and you know, most of it we couldn't do. But to me, there's some of it we could try to do. I mean, we talked about the Christmas lights, I mean, things that would have a budget impact. And the chamber and the Maple, are those in or out still? I mean, those types of questions. Are they going back in? Are we going half this year? I mean, those things feel to me like they're still open. Or is it,
And we've looked.
anybody else feel that way?
We've looked at I know we talked about the Christmas lights and potentially doing that, and so we've had a lot of discussions with. Well, I've had a lot of discussions talking with the department heads and
Okay.
different folks. Is that I don't think that's a realistic goal for us in this year.
Okay.
So like for us this winter to do that, one, we have the substation that we're trying to bring online, and two, those guys are part of the build out that we do for the new substation line. So if we did do that, then it would be later for us to bring that substation online. I think that would be more realistic for something that we would do potentially next year. We have the phase 2 of the Heritage subdivision. We're going to be starting out there, basically running all the new electric lines out there because everything's going underground. So that's another time commitment. We have several time commitments that are coming up that are leading up to this. Especially like with Maple Leaf. Maple Leaf is an all hands on deck, and to prepare for Maple Leaf is almost a week, and to tear down is almost a week. So right there, you've lost 10 working days really in that regards. So we would be really hard pressed to do that this year. After visiting with the guys and actually talking through it in more depth. So
That's fair. I mean,
That's already budgeted from last year.
but that and
it is, but what we showed was we could save 20 grand if we
I
did
thought
it
that was
ourselves.
for next year.
Oh, we are talking, this budget is for next year.
I know,
So
but
what you're saying is,
he's talking.
I'm talking
for
this year.
Oh,
I'm talking this year because what I was trying to
No.
what I was trying to do with that part
point, yeah.
is I was trying to save 20,000 on this budget year so I could kick that into next year.
I followed you.
And I was trying to jump. I was
following.
jumping the gates, but I was trying to find.
you got me back online. I didn't, I'm talking the 27
But
budget.
27, I think 27 budget. I think we could truly potentially do that.
Well, that's what we're talking about tonight,
Correct.
right? So that's where, and it's not in 27, it hasn't been pulled out of 27 budget.
It has not yet. No.
That's what I was trying to get at, is that
Yeah, we could.
things that we could plan to do next year to pull out of that budget, and this year's already done, right? It's budgeted. So that was what I wanted to say, is there are things that we can do, the low-hanging fruit, nothing's without its issues,
Correct.
to pull out of 27. And that way you've done that, and then that, unless you determine it was real negative and you put it back in, that then keeps giving every year. It's a reduced number every year. So that's just what I wanted to bring up. Is there any of that we wanted to try to pull out of that budget for 27 and make the reserve forecast look a little better?
Yeah. That would be one of the things for 27 that we could potentially do. I'm sure there's several other things that we could do. I don't think that they're going to be as far as moving the needle like what we think it would do. But I think the 20,000 towards the electric, the Christmas lights would do that. But that would be, but even though we're saving 20 on paper, it's not truly
Right, you
saving
got labor,
money,
yeah.
'cause we still got to have the labor, and in the first year you're going to have all the upfront costs of the garland, the lights, any kind of clips, whatever kind of cords they're using, those kinds of different things. So the first year, I don't know that there's necessarily going to be a huge savings, but it's kind of one of the questions I have is like, well, how many strands of lights and how long are the strands of lights? And because I was trying to run some hypothetical numbers so that I could wrap my head around okay, first year is going to cost us, 25,000, but then every year after that, we're going to figure it's 5,000. So we would save that $15,000 gap. Was kind of my thought. Now you're always going to have to replace, lights, throughout, but it's not like you're replacing all of them year round. And then another thing is we've got to figure out about how we're going to store these things, and how that looks. So.
Yeah, I just think that we need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. So I think we need to start planning for what happens if we get hit with a cap.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise we're going to be sitting here flailing and having we need to start having those real hard conversations ahead of it ever happening, and hopefully it never does. But I'd hate to wait until it does, and then you go, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
It's almost
bit
like
proactive
emergency preparedness training. It's like, what are we going to do if the scenario was this?
And looking at that 27 budget going into it, is that tuning back some of the extra money on Chamber of Commerce? And also, and I'm an advocate of the paper, I'm telling you right now, I like it. I like the community paper, but is that also tuning back that?
Correct.
Okay, and the economic development?
And then EDC as well, yes.
That was in his original.
That was in my the
Yeah,
original.
okay, I just want to make sure I understand it. God, fly, just understand it correctly.
So,
And next question, just real quickly. This Public Works building that we have that's kind of out here to the side, how long does economic development lease that for? Is that lease up next year?
it's for 1 year.
Will it be up next July?
Yes.
Okay. So it is possible in July, we could look at putting that bid up for sealed bid, that building up for sealed bid.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Where are you gonna store all the Christmas lights?
In that building.
We can always find a spot.
In Corey's garage.
I don't know if you can fit anything else in there.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything else we need to do tonight. I mean, if we're not,
I'm down.
I mean, thought process is it for me as well as Matt as we go into, because September 1st is the budget hearing, and then the plan would be to adopt that budget at that meeting. Is having some, I don't know, guidance on exactly what you guys want to see, so that we can bring that to the table to take for a vote. Is that looking at, is that staying with the cuts? Is that looking at doing like reduced cuts? Say you look at it over a period of phasing it out over 3 years completely. Is it, those are kind of the questions that I have.
I'm not following you, because if you reduce a cut, it actually then requires more revenue.
So what I'm saying is like for the chamber. If you reduce the chamber, if you did it over 3 years, where you,
Oh, I got you. I'm with you now.
you base it over 3 years time, like a stair step down, or
I think Julie brought that up last time. Yeah, so that makes sense, although it is going to, based on what you've published, whatever we don't do this year, when we push to next year, it comes out of the reserve.
correct.
It just lowers that amount. But I mean, I agree with Julie. From a planning perspective, you'd like to give them more runway to, handle that.
Yeah. That way they could do their fundraising and
Well, I'd also like, if we do that and let's just say that they don't get fundraising in place and they're not unable to recoup those funds somewhere else, what effect is that going to have? And we'll be able to see it incrementally instead of, like a pretty large cut all of a sudden, a large difference in 1 year. So if the cuts are on the table, then I would like to see it not quite so drastic.
Is there any way at all, because the chamber's funded basically 2 ways. You got city contribution, school district contribution. No, I'm sorry. That's ED. I think that's rec.
rec.
Sorry. So, city contribution and then membership fees.
Yep.
That's it. So if one goes away, they're gonna have to increase membership fees, right? That's what's gonna happen. If the city cuts their chamber funding, they're gonna have to go out and really try and incentivize businesses to join. Is there a way we can blend those two? Is there a way we can make the city's contribution reflective, attached to, incentivized by, that way members of the community say, we really want to support our chamber. Well, become a member if you're a business, or become a member, because there's a lot of businesses out in Baldwin right now that aren't chamber members. And so if that's the message, that, we'd like to be some proportion of that equation. We know that you need X amount to run, and it's our contribution versus chamber membership. I wonder if there's a way that we could incentivize our contribution for membership. So if you're at 100 chamber, so maybe it's $100 per chamber member of the city country. I don't know how many chamber members there are, but maybe it's, we give same way, the school district, the state gives them $7,500 for a kid. You know what I mean? And that way it's and I'm just brainstorming here, but that way it incentivizes community members, business owners to get involved with the chamber, to say, hey, instead of, city needs to contribute more. Well, then the city's going to come back and say, well, you need to get your membership up. Is there a way we can tie everything into that to where there's
But it's not a bad idea. But there's only so many.
not an idea, it was a
there-
brainstorm.
Well, okay.
We have 8 minutes left.
But there's only so many businesses. So eventually they're going to cap out.
Well,
I mean,
you reflect that in how you want to structure, the incentive.
it could.
But I feel like that's the give and take, right? If the city is able to fund less, then they're gonna have to go out and get more members. They're a 501c3. They're a nonprofit. They can't go so many members that they're all of a sudden profitable, and then our contribution should come down, right? Right. So I'm just saying, if we can think about it more in those terms.
And I think last I looked at the website, they were at 114 members already.
Okay.
So do the math on our contribution, you can kind of tell what our, I don't know what the budget is. I don't know what their dues are.
It varies by level. I looked. There's
You could do
certain.
the math real quick.
There's a lot that are little. The
Their total dues divided by the 36K that
Right.
we put in there.
Right.
That gives you where we're at today. But to your point, you could do something like that.
Yeah, a community definitely benefits from a more active chamber membership. And if we're at, I don't even know I should have asked when she was here, but if we're at 50% participation in the chamber, well, then that needs to go up. And how can we maybe, instead of just a regular contributor, every year we give X amount, it's reflective of membership, like an incentive deal, because the city gains both ways. If there's more chamber members and businesses are working together to grow Baldwin economically, we should contribute to that.
Yeah.
Look forward to your plan
That was it. That was it.
being presented at the next meeting.
I will actually kind of reflect on that.
Yeah, think about
maybe
that.
how that would look. Sometimes I just spit things out without thinking it through.
That's right in your committee.
Hey, let's put it in CDC next Monday.
You're right.
They just sent it to another committee.
Yeah, that's right.
It starts there, but it doesn't end there.
Does not end
No, it
there.
wouldn't come to public safety. So
It might.
Nope.
Everybody have all their questions answered, at least for right now? We can end it and take a 5-minute break before Jay's starts his committee. Everybody good with that?
Just before, do we need to make a decision on the
Yeah.
chamber and as far as go forward?
I think we need to, we need to make some,
Give-
about the chamber, those are some of the cuts that are proposed in here.
If the budget's the budget, we can make that decision at any time. But we probably need to make it sooner as opposed to later so they know what's going on.
So I feel like they would need to know. I think they would need to know for sure on September 1st,
Okay.
on the night that we adopt the budget. So
Do we need, should we be proposing those things to you, just saying, hey, Russ, I really want to keep the chamber and the maple or whatever else is on there? What would it take budget wise? Like, and what, obviously we've already seen that where we're at right now. If we
So I think
don't move the needle,
with those with those cuts, you're looking at roughly at 47,000.
yeah,
57,000 is roughly 1 mil.
about 59.
Is kind of what we've kind of figured. And so, if that's the case and we want to keep those things going and moving forward, then we would need to raise the mill one.
Yeah.
One.
Okay.
So,
Not this year.
but
It would come out of the reserve.
it would have to come out of
We've already set the budget max.
for 26. 26 is already set,
27s, yeah.
but this is 27.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Talking
27.
27, yeah.
No, and you just published 27.
Correct. But what I published was
Max.
the max of all maxes.
Yeah.
Because we can come back and go less. We can't
So I
come
can
back,
come back and
more.
go less.
Understand? Yeah. But I thought what you published had those cuts in it already. So we couldn't go more or less. We can double take them out.
Potentially, yes. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I think they're already out. And
I think-
if we spread it out or reduce that amount, we don't get any more revenue. It's just going to come out of the reserve for 27.
For 27, yes.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So that's the decision. And it's really, you need to make it sooner as opposed to later, but it's already been set that here's our budget. And anything that you do less than that from an expenditure perspective, or more, any less reductions you do, double negative.
Yeah.
It's coming out of your reserve because you don't get a charging more revenue. So, and that's fine. You just need to make sure when you make these decisions what the impact's going to be. And I don't know when they do their budgets. That would be a good idea. Is it annual? Are they fiscally
Yeah, I think they
calendar year?
yeah, they do them. I think theirs is based off of a calendar year because they were planning on doing, my understanding is they're doing their strategic direction planning later on in the month of September, once they heard what the city council was going to decide on them, on their funding.
I think just the next meeting we give guidance on what we want to do.
Yeah, we have to, yeah.
Whether it stays at what was proposed, which was, you saw was 9,000 from the Maple and 20,000 out of the. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't any, but that's really just informative of those organizations, of how we're going to treat the budget that we're going to pass on the 1st of September. It's just a bucket of money, and this is just how we're going to divvy it up.
Disperse it out.
But nothing. I mean, but nothing would change. If you said, "Hey, no, actually, I don't want to make those cuts," it's not necessarily that it would come out. It's the whole pot for the general fund, and you can adjust it. I mean, it wouldn't come exactly out of your reserve because that's 9,000 or however. Let's say 9,000 was whichever one that was.
But we built our budget based on revenue and expenses in
Correct.
the reserve. So if your expenses go back up because you aren't making the cuts, then your reserve goes down.
Go down, yeah.
Right, but it wouldn't be any different than the scenario had you chosen that before you published it. If it went into the published, you know what I mean? Because right now you go into a published up 9,000.
Yeah.
Had you not, you would have spent 9,000 already.
Correct.
It's just the other side of it. You're still making the same decision with the same outcome.
Yeah, with a different reserve outcome. That's the only change that would happen.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
Have a motion, don't need a motion?
No.
No. Just adjourn the work session.